Well, let's begin. Let's start with the invocation and pledge of allegiance.
Ball heads.
Oh wait, we don't have the flag.
I got a flag on my shirt.
Well, imagine there's one.
I got a flag too.
Okay, we'll all
All right.
face Bernie.
Okay.
Okay. Most Heavenly Father, we thank you for this special day. We thank you for this opportunity to come together and handle the business of the coast, as you would give us wisdom, knowledge, and understanding. That you bless our board chair, our vice chair, the board members, and staff. With all these blessings there. Amen.
All right.
Face Bernie! Get the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good job.
We may need to parse
It's
that.
terrible that after Trump has arrived, the flag has shrunk that small size.
This was a gift from Daryl.
Inviting.
Ryan's got several
I
of
have
them
one
too.
too.
You got more than one.
Let me know when you're gonna stand up again, it takes me some time.
I'll give you a warning.
All right, I'm looking around in the circular warding and I do not see any visitors. Although given this building, we could have all sorts of visitors coming in and out. Is this the place where I have to go to court? So we have no public comment. I did have a great dream though about this new funding plan that Brian has been working on. And I think it's more of a public comment than it is a chair's comment, but I'll stick it in at the end of the general manager's report. I always have to watch out about my dreams. I have to sort of verify that they were really as thoughtful as they seemed in the middle of the night. Pardon? Yeah, we'll call the roll. We'll call.
Catherine D'Angelo.
Here.
Sid Blackwelder.
Here.
Darrell Eichhoff.
Present.
Debbie Gasquet. Wilbur G. James.
Here.
Lily Jean Johnson.
Here.
Marvin Keene. Joseph Lazara.
Here?
Rob Sheehan.
Here.
Bernard Silverman.
Here.
Ivory Wilson.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, we have a quorum.
Thank you.
Very good.
Brian, you've got any employee recognition?
I do. Just wanted to take a moment to, I guess, say goodbye to Sharon Hallett, who is our customer service representative. She worked for the agency around 10 years, I think, started out as a driver. She passed away last week, last Monday. She was pretty sick. The end of her life, I don't think, was a very comfortable one. You know, she did not have a lot of family outside of Coast RTA. And so I just wanted to let the board know that we will be hosting a memorial, and have we scheduled that yet?
Not yet, we're waiting on Casper to come back.
Yeah, we're waiting on Casper Allison, who's a pastor, to come and lead that, and we will get you all an invite to that. But we will miss her dearly, and just heavy heart.
Things like that really shake an organization, you know, when it's a small enough group that everybody knows everybody.
Ma'am,
She was young, wasn't she?
Yeah.
Sharon would have been 65.
She was a
2
youngster.
days ago.
A youngster.
How long did she work right up until the end?
She started in 2008.
Yeah, but yeah, she
When was the last day with us at work?
The 11th.
maybe a month ago.
November.
Yeah, a little over a month
Did you get your
ago.
mileage in yet?
But it was getting pretty bad at the end. She was not really
Yeah.
able to work, and we tried to give her every accommodation that we could.
Grandma's deep.
So we'll miss her.
And we have a Christmas event coming up this Saturday.
Saturday is our Christmas party
At the Hilton?
at the Sheridan
Sheridan?
Convention Center.
You're going to the Hilton?
Y'all take full staff coming in?
Starts at 6. Sure.
Is the parking garage the best place to park?
I- Really? I don't know. I mean, that's for the hotel, isn't it?
I've never been in that garage, I go to the outside lot.
Yeah, but I think
It's $8.50 to park your car.
Yeah, it might cost you money.
$8.50.
One,
Now you park on the street, it won't cost you nothing.
right, or you
Where you get
park
charged?
behind the building.
The big
Park back
In the
on the
big
street.
lot back, I don't think they'll be charging because there's no what's going on. That's where I would recommend, it's a little bit of
Yeah, right to
a
the
walk to
hospital.
get into
Oh,
where
drop
our
them
bar
Park in the
is.
front, you won't get charged.
Okay.
So, and there's a lot of handicap parking pretty close to the door, so.
Here's Deb, good.
utilize that.
Meeting's already finished, huh?
Quick, change
Oh,
your
yeah.
sign in. Change your sign in.
So that's it for employee recognition.
May I have a request for approval of the minutes? It's good to notice that Dr. Twig is identified as a full-fledged citizen.
Well, I'm glad you're on that, though, because we list him as no visitors, and later we say that Dr. Twig was
He came
here.
in
Well, we had a visitor
a
then.
lot later.
I mean, I read those, and somebody else said, wait, we say we had this visitor here, and then we say we had no visitors.
Yeah.
We either deconflict the two.
Okay.
All right.
Exact.
Any other edits or suggestions for the minutes?
I'll make a motion, minutes be approved.
So, second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Opposite sign? All right. Service CAP report. My brain has gone to nuts. I don't know if we have any.
Yeah, we had it. We haven't had
We
any.
didn't have one.
No, we did.
We didn't have one. No.
We did, November 8th.
The chair, we didn't have one, did we? We had one last month.
Oh, it's because this meeting is so early in the month,
We
December
did have a
6th.
November meeting.
Yeah,
So no November board meeting, so this is the board meeting following.
No, we didn't have
I don't know. I
How
can't
quickly we
remember.
forget.
well, do we have anything to offer that would have been brought to a service or PAC meeting?
There were several items on the agenda. The first item was the service change for 15 North. And I believe we held 3 public meetings, and we've gotten a few comments otherwise. And March 1st is the deadline for making that decision. It's December?
Yes.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, March 1st was the entertainment show issue.
Okay. thank
Yeah,
you.
so we were going, I remember now, we had the debate about whether or not we needed board approval for making the change permanent. But,
Oh, that's right, right.
So, that's something that we need the board to vote on, and we'll get the app changed and everything. All that's started, but we did want a formal support.
Do you want to do that at this meeting?
I think we can do it right now, if we can.
Okay.
Yes.
Can you think up a motion on the fly?
All right, I move that we approve the change of the 15 North from Ocean Boulevard to Highway 17.
Let me interject, before we,
Get a second.
don't get a second first, then we go. I'll second, then I'll.
Any discussion on it?
Yeah, I was just wondering, what the purpose of that change again, Brian?
Well, we improved our on-time performance, and we weren't getting any ridership along the Golden Mile, basically from 38th North to, I don't know, 65th North. And we were beating up buses trying to get in and out of 38th. So, you know, it's a litany of those issues that decided to hold on to 15 North. It's been running that way since middle of July. With improved on-time performance, I think ridership's basically stayed stagnant. We certainly haven't lost any, and maybe gained a few. And we just felt like this was significant enough a change that we wanted to get, you know, consensus from the board.
Was that the trees? The trees hitting the,
Heating up
yeah,
and air conditioning.
yeah.
Okay, I understand that part, and I agree with you on that. So you think that you want to change it from what avenue again? I missed it.
It's been
So
changed.
basically staying on
It's been
Kings
changed,
Highway.
but I'm
all the
saying,
way
but the
north.
change, is it be more effective now, has it been changed?
I think so. I mean, there are a few people who are getting off at the resorts up there at the north end of Myrtle Beach that have to walk kind of across, and 3 or 4 blocks across from Kings Highway. But there are a number of trip generators and potential destinations on Kings Highway that we think, will generate ridership as well. So,
And do you have a sense that the change that we made will go okay with signage, permanent signage?
oh yeah, that shouldn't be an issue. I mean, we've got to make some changes to the signs on Ocean Boulevard, because there's some out there, but, yeah, I mean, I just think even looking forward, a route that for 15 North that stays on Kings Highway has a little better potential for serving further north as well. So, no, there was no, or very little, comments to the contrary for this change. And that, what few comments we got, most people were saying that this is a good change.
Okay, any other comments?
Yeah, I just want to reflect on them. And we might ask this question too, because I know making any particular changes in the routes, sometimes you get accustomed to being on a certain, with the bus at, I know like Harris, would that affect Harris area? Not really?
Yeah, no, this change is north of there,
Okay.
north of
But I
that.
was saying, people have been asking, wanting for the bus to come that route, because
Goes right past
they
there.
go further down.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay, all those in favor, please say aye. Opposed? Passes. Anything else, Lily Jean, from Service and
Entertainment show, talk about the route expansion, and perhaps having that done through grants, looking at the fare that we will recover from that, perhaps something from the state, and ATAX.
Yeah, sort of the full court press on trying to find tourist-based funding sources that might fund that. I think that's still a work in progress. We haven't made a whole lot of advancement on that since that meeting, aside from a discussion with the chamber and a few of the larger resort owners.
Did we send letters out to them?
They have not sent letters out yet, but we'll get that done here in the next week or so.
Okay.
Get those
And then
out.
we're gonna have final decision on March 1st, correct? In March.
Yes, yeah, we'll know one way or the other if we're running it or not. I'll reserve a little bit more discussion on this when we talk about this funding arrangement with the county during the general manager's report.
Can we get a December 15th commitment on getting that letter out?
Sure.
It's kind of a heads up to the hotel folks.
Yep.
Ask-
Dolores,
Dolores, I haven't seen November numbers yet, but we were doing on the magnitude of about 40 people a day on those two routes combined, Bucksport and Dolores. And for 3 trips, that's not bad for, we've only been running it since August 15th. So I think leading up to the summer months, we will do another marketing campaign and get people to know about it. We've still got to do some surveys per the grant work. And really then the only other issue is getting the grant rolling. We haven't seen any cash from it yet. And we're in negotiations with the state due office on exactly how we're billing it. They want to bill it by passenger, which is a little bit scary, especially since the contract says this is a cost reimbursement agreement. And I've warned them, and I've warned the COG, and COG's involved in these conversations as well, that, one month we may have $28 a passenger because we had a really good ridership month, and then another month we might have $93 a passenger when we had a bad month. And, I'm okay with giving them a bill that says that, but are they gonna be okay with paying this very volatile rate through the course of it? And the bottom line is, I agreed to do this because I was gonna get $100,000 out of the deal to operate it, and
There's almost no way.
we're not gonna not get $100,000, so.
There's no way they could determine what the per passenger rate is at this point to culminate in $100,000.
Well, and then the only way to do it is to do it on a monthly basis and just give them actual costs divided into the number of passengers, and we'll do that if that's really the way they want it. But the issue is that, we're talking about an agency that doesn't do a lot of transportation, so they're not that familiar with how, the nuts and bolts of how we work. And two, there are other transits in South Carolina that were using these funds to subsidize existing services. So they were essentially getting like an agency rate for people who were accessing education and jobs and things like that through an existing route. So it was like a glorified fare. So in that type of instance, you could do a per passenger rate pretty easily and just spend it down as you go. You know, and those particular agencies, their costs never change, and they're still running the same level of service basically. So it's, you know, they're trying to put a lot of square pegs into round holes, and we'll get them straight.
So when we agreed to this grant in the beginning, there was no, it wasn't stipulated how they would pay or when they would pay or?
It just said cost reimbursement. And it's a three-way contract. When the state pushes down requirements to the COG, and then the COG pushes down requirements to us. And the COG is on our side. They understand what the problem is, and they think that we just need to have a conversation with the state. We can talk them down and do something that works for both sides.
Yeah, because this business of counting passengers and paying per is not gonna work for us.
Well, when you costed it out, you knew that the cost was well in excess of $100,000, so it's just a matter of getting that point across.
Yeah, and really, the per passenger rate is fine as long as they agree to its volatility. But even if we set some rate over the course of the year, I'm gonna set it such that I'm gonna recoup $100,000 by December 30th of next year.
Right.
You know, this discussion started with ridership on Loris. At the Horry County Transportation Committee on Monday, you were asked the same question about Bucksport and Loris. For the record, do you recall what numbers you gave in response to that question?
I think you said 30.
I think you said 15 on Loris and 9 to 12 on Bucksport, I think is how you answered that question.
Yep.
That's a daily rate.
Part of the road construction on 701 is finishing up. I mean, the bridges are still going to be there forever, but it's going to be a cleaner route down to Bucksport.
Yeah, really, we haven't had too many on-time performance issues on 701 South, have we? You know, the time of day that we're going through there, the crews might not even be out there yet.
That's pretty early.
Okay. Hey, Brian, back to the APEC, still gonna work for the city?
Yeah, let's talk about that in the general manager report, because I have
Okay.
additional information.
I got some additional
delivered to
information
the
too.
board.
Okay. All right. Shall we move on to finance? We don't have a finance. Oh, do you have anything more, Ms. Legend?
Yes, the committee also talked about the complaint analysis that the agency done. And within a year, there were 40 complaints, documented complaints. And it was stated perhaps we need to look at the way that we are documenting complaints. And maybe Brian would like to speak to that.
And in particular, documenting when people don't leave a name and a phone number.
Getting a little bit more trend analysis going. You know, yes, we had 40 documented complaints, and the biggest finding that came out of that is we need to do more work on how we're handling complaints. It just wasn't, it's just not robust enough database to really be able to determine anything. So we are, and it's kind of one of the reasons why Doug's here, is there's a number of changes afoot. One big change we're planning is we're going to move Erica Hill into the customer service department. She's going to be supervising it. She'll be in charge of their schedule. It takes a little bit of heat off of Doug and the road supervisors, not to have to worry about phone coverage and those types of things. And she's going to be pressed with getting us better data on, you know, how phone calls are being handled, what are people calling about, you know, keeping up on the public information side of the house. So it's a good opportunity for her, and we haven't really told anybody internally yet, so we need to probably make that happen. But she's getting through Coats for Kids, and then we're going to make the
Has
change.
she supervised anybody in the past?
She has limited experience in that. I did ask her that
You may want to help
question.
her a little bit on that, because the first time supervisor, they're, okay, you're aware of that then.
I got it covered, Mr. Darrell.
Well, I think that,
Well, she's been involved in a
Well-
lot of organizations and all.
Yeah, but if you haven't been a direct first-line supervisor, there's do's and don'ts, and you're aware of that, and you're going to help her, to where
Yes.
she doesn't fail, we help her succeed.
Right, we're going to put her.
well, I think there's gonna be some guidelines that are gonna be stipulated from the general manager down to to the core, where she would know what they expect, from, you know, from the, I don't think he's gonna throw out to the wolves, I think, because it's a necessity, and I understand what the, you know, what's being said, but, there is a necessity and a need to have somebody, to oversee this area, because it can get kind of overwhelming for Doug, and, you know, 'cause we don't have to talk about you, how you want to deal with that stuff until it comes to your table.
Right.
So, but there is a process, of, in-house training, you can help person. I know you have some experience that, and Doug may have some, so if I work together and they work on that level, because it's not nothing that's impossible to learn, so.
So the main reason for doing it is to get a little bit more attention paid to the processing of complaints. We'll add in non-documented complaints to it just to look for trends, not to really necessarily blow the whistle on anybody, but I think she'll be good at that.
But not only that, I mean, this is my area I wanted to talk about, not call the area, but I think customer service is essential. The city of Murphy had first in service, because you have to provide service to people. When people talk to me all the time, and all the board members about, you know, that they're not getting this and not getting that, and I say, you need to call office, you know what I mean? So when they call, there should be a place you can call to get some answers, at least get something led up to you, so you'll be aware. Otherwise, you're gonna be scatterbrained, and this is why we are now. We don't have anybody directly actively dealing with this stuff, because they don't have the manpower. So it's essential. And if it's get too critical, then you have to make the change you need to make if she can't handle it. I mean, that's just the way it is.
Well, I mean, I think one of the key skills that she has is talking to people in general.
She'll do good.
So she will be the one front and center responding to complaints.
Well, Erica has she worked with me for a long time in ACP and in the Jazz Festival. She has a lot of computer knowledge, you know what I mean? She understands how to do stuff. So I can speak on half somebody I know, not because, you know, being personal, but if I know somebody has certain skills that dealt with me, I can talk about that person. I think she can handle the job based on her experience and stuff. If I didn't know the person, I couldn't be saying this. But anyway, we can move on.
Well, there are two sides.
She's got the job, so.
Yeah, there are two sides. So one is providing the service to the clients that are concerns, and the other is having a quantitative understanding of what is happening, which means we've got to start recording the complaints that we don't have a name or number for to see what the pattern is.
And being more responsive to recurring problems.
Yeah.
I want to make sure that my question earlier or comment, I think that's an excellent choice, a good thing. I just want to help her succeed, not feel this is the first
Understood.
time she's, that's where I'm coming, she will do fine. I think it was a good change. I want to make sure to wait. I have no doubt she'll do well.
But I understand what you're saying, and what you're saying is very relevant to a lot of companies and stuff when they hire people, someone with experience in that level of dealing with people. And I do appreciate, and I'm sure the board appreciate, you know, your insight on stuff, and that's good. And we all got different views, but overall, I think the position that Brian is taking right now is probably going to be very effective.
Very good. So I think that was it, right?
Okay, let's move on.
It's like on Veterans Day, there was no fair to
Oh,
ride the bus.
So there was one other thing. We provided free rides to veterans on Veterans Day. In addition to that, we instituted a half fare for veterans.
Did anybody ride?
We haven't done the November close yet, so I don't know. But we'll get some numbers on that for you.
How do we know someone's a veteran?
They just have to show us some sort of
Well,
ID.
I told you yesterday, I got an email yesterday. The VA has stopped issuing cards. There's such an overwhelming request for these cards, they're stopped issuing them. So you gotta carry your fold up DD-214, which is an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. The VA has stopped issuing the card because I'm a veteran. I just read it I started to forward it to you.
Right.
Why is it?
Huh?
What reason did they give?
It's over, they can't keep up with the demand. There's millions and millions of
They haven't
veterans,
hired
think about
enough,
it.
they haven't hired enough people.
Yeah.
Yeah, Michelle will look into that,
Daryl,
how we are
that's-
identifying people who are veterans.
Okay.
And I'll work with the VA, so send
Yeah,
it to me.
what I was interested, was that advertised or whatever, so any?
We put out press release and
Yeah, okay.
those
Because
types
It's
of
on
things.
Facebook too.
I didn't look for it, so I didn't see it.
I heard it on the radio.
He asked about Facebook, Brian, is it on Facebook?
I believe so.
I saw it on Facebook.
Oh, well, you saw it on Facebook.
I mean, I'm still worried about our driver. It's like, I'm a veteran. Well, I guess, the answer is, everybody says they're a veteran, you come on.
You'll be giving 75 cents, we're done.
If they're 95,
Gotcha.
if they're 95 years old, they get on, they said they're a veteran, you know they're a veteran.
Well, at that point, they get the senior rate anyway.
Yeah, they got senior rates.
How about,
Another thing, Brian, bus stop designation.
yeah,
Yes. That's in, I have that in the GM report, but
Oh,
we're expecting a draft, I'll just go ahead. We're expecting a draft of the procedures in the next week and a half or so.
is that a little bit later than you thought? Well, my memory was 2 months ago or a month ago, we were gonna be out on the street by now with some things.
Oh, no, we're still in the planning phase. They have been here and done some tests on their procedures for identifying locations, taking pictures, GPS locating, all that stuff. So they were here, they were actually here Wednesday of the dinner, the Thanksgiving dinner that we had, they were here that day. So we're expecting the first draft of the procedures to be sent to me here in the next week and a half. I'm gonna kick it back with some comments, and then they're supposed to turn that around pretty quickly so that we can get it out to you probably between Christmas and New Year's timeframe, and then we'll discuss it at the Service Pack Committee in January.
And weren't they gonna have the policies in order for us at the end of January? Wasn't that what they said?
Right, so we're gonna go over a draft at the Service Pack Committee, and then they'll take those comments back. So
Yeah, that's what
I'm
they
hoping to give you guys some time
Yeah,
to look at it before the meeting.
so that's what they promised at the end of January.
So, and that's still the plan at this point.
There would be an education component to that too, where we've got to educate our riders, both in terms of where to get on and where to get off. So I assume it will no longer be, just drop me off here, we've got to stop at a
Yeah, we've
signed stop.
We've talked about that before. I kind of envisioned sort of a transition phase where we would do both and then,
Yeah.
and just say, hey, look, stop sign's up there, you know, wait for it up there if you don't mind. And educate them that way, just sort of through, you know, organic methods like that, but we'll see how it goes. I mean, I do think we need to get, you know, when the stop signs start creeping up, that we're gonna have to, you know, be pretty loud about, hey, we have stop signs now, please find one of those locations to access our system.
And even for the drivers to understand that, so they can.
Yeah, the drivers can't wait. The drivers are tired of stopping 3 times in a 200-foot section.
Ms. Jean, I don't know that it came up in the service pack report, but it is a service pack issue, and it might have come up in the board meeting, which was the register, or the hidden gun, that's not hidden.
Oh, yes, that
Concealed
came
weapon.
up,
The
that
concealed,
came up, concealed
the
carry.
concealed weapon, and then also the issue of active shooter training. And I had mentioned that either now or in the GM report, we would need an update on that.
And you'll get one.
Okay, all right. And the question was signage
Keep stealing
on
that
concealed
sign.
weapon. I'm doing Bernie's list, but signage on the buses themselves.
Blame it on me, man.
Bernie's list.
Signage on the buses themselves, and then some idea of training for drivers as well. Okay. All right, let's move on to
I got
finance.
one more thing.
Yes, sir.
It's only gonna take 11 seconds. I want to play this little recording for you. This is the Annunciator.
21st Avenue North Greens Boulevard. Street, Planet Fitness. An Enterprise. So, Walmart. Branding. Cinema.
Now, can you repeat that with the accent so those of us down this end of the table can hear it?
I can bring the phone down there, but I can't repeat it.
Tom, do we have choices of accent on that?
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
Do we need a southern accent? What kind
Yes,
of?
yeah.
Yeah, I like the British accent.
Fitness. Enterprise. So, Walmart.
Oh, my.
Cinema.
And that's chopped up because I didn't press the button until it
So we
started.
have a at least a trial run on the Annunciator. I think there's still some bugs being worked out.
Yeah, I would call it a soft rollout.
Mhm.
And we still have a couple buses that don't have the equipment on them yet. They haven't been wired in all the way, 2 or 3.
Just 2.
2. And, but yeah, I mean, we're putting it on every route that we can, right, Doug?
Yes, sir.
Do you have a sense of rider reaction to that?
Sir?
Do you have a sense of rider reaction to that?
For the most part, most of the riders that's currently using the system, they like to do. It gets a little noisy on some
Yeah,
buses,
I wondered, yeah.
but right now.
There's a lot of static in that.
Well, I think a lot of that's the phone.
Yeah, that's what's
Oh,
so
oh.
You know, that's just- And there was a lot of noise, there's a lot of road noise and whatnot.
Is it clear? Can you hear it when you're on?
Yes, yeah.
And loud, very loud.
It depends on, I've been on buses where it's loud and somewhere, it's just kind of faint. This bus was a loud bus.
What was it trying to say?
It was giving locations.
What we got?
Some of the next stop is.
Like, it was giving pre-recorded locations.
This is a requirement, an ADA requirement for supporting the visually impaired, that you announce stops.
All right.
At least major stops on routes.
It also supports the nappers, which I'm one of those.
The
And
nappers.
visually impaired, yeah.
That's
And
nice.
that's-
So they wake up when they hear their stop.
Well, and Bernie had to suffer through the Catholic interpretation of the Annunciation.
You don't say
The
that,
Annunciation and what that was about. I'll do that for you later.
Yes, thank you for reserving that for.
All has to do with Mary and her cousin.
Thank you, Rob. I can forward Rob's emails, they're lengthy.
All right, Finance Committee report.
Okay, I'll take that lead since Mark
Please,
is not
Mark is
here.
not here, yep.
We went through the October financials. Things look pretty good. A little high on maintenance, which had to do with inventory adjustment, right, Ron?
Yeah,
For the most part. I think we haven't seen the November numbers, but he's pulled back that considerably.
Some of it was the Gillings, when we disposed of the Gillings, we took some of the parts out of inventory to include with the buses.
So yeah, you have to expense them once you pull them out of inventory. We should see this go right back into line. I think he's only in the mid-20s on maintenance costs in November, and he's got a $35,000 a month budget, so we should be in pretty good shape on that. In general, it's all kind of in line.
And we've really gone over these in our last board meeting.
We went over in finance.
Yeah.
Oh, in finance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, the whole intent of that is to really sweat through them in finance. So I don't know that I really have too many other highlights on the financials themselves. I
Are you on
will,
maintenance, can I ask a question? I'm confused a little bit, our issue with Justin and the county not reimbursing yet for engine replacement, does that skew how we display our above or below budget?
yeah, no, it's how we're being rearbursed for
I
those
understand that
expenses. The
part.
expenses are in there, so it doesn't really affect what's going on here. It affects the revenue budget,
Well, that's.
how,
But if you're above or below budget, if we, before the 1 million from the county, if we were gonna do engine replacement anyway, you'd have an expense with no offsetting revenue. Now you got the revenue, it's,
Well, the two engine replacements he's talking about occurred in FY17, so
Okay.
they're not showing up here. But they did show up as expenses in July through September timeframe.
okay,
All for just $12.
all right.
Join
I
today.
guess I think I understand what you said, okay.
So the issue with the county
Wow,
is that,
that's my phone give about self.
the issue with the county is, we've turned those expenses in. They are funded like a capital expense.
We don't appreciate
But
that.
from an accounting perspective, they show up as an operating expense.
Yeah,
All
okay.
right, and so they're funded at 80/20. What's going on with you?
I don't know, it's
But
nuts.
for budget, I guess what I'm thinking, even to get away from the 17 versus 18 issue, going
Just
forward,
turning you on.
Yes.
Sorry about that. I was trying to turn you down.
okay, we're getting the capital, out of the million, we're getting money from the county. We have the expense, on the expense line, our budget never put money in the budget to cover that cost? It seems like we're always gonna show
Because we're showing it like a capital.
we're showing that we're bad versus we're okay.
Well, I think it's a little bit more accurate to say it that we just took the budget hit.
Okay.
You
Well,
know,
that's what I'm saying.
it's kind of a better way of putting
It
it.
is.
We have some money in the 18 budget for these types of expenditures.
Okay.
The issue with the county is that we're not changing our balance sheet with
I
these
understand.
expenditures. And it's a really strict, it's an interpretation of our agreement that I don't agree with.
It's payback.
And yes, there's a little bit of payback in there, because they weren't happy with me sliding in the whole engine thing in the
Yeah.
first place. So there's two types of engine replacements. There's just the straight up engine or transmission replacement. They get funded at 80%, which meets the agreement. But you do not extend the life of the bus. The asset is the bus, not the engine. And so FTA allows you to fund that at 80% and not change the useful life of the bus. Now, there's also a refurbishment, and you would do a lot more to a bus in a refurbishment situation. You might change seats, you might do some structural repairs, you might repaint it, you might do a lot of other things, replace with suspension and those types of things. And those are on the neighborhood of $75,000 to $80,000 or more, even depending on what you do. And you do have to extend the useful life 4 years when you do that. And I've told the county, we're gonna do both. There's a few, we've got one in the back now that's been stripped and will be repainted, one of the dark buses, while it's waiting on an engine. So that one will be a bigger package that'll go, and there will be an asset. There'll be an asset inventory change related to that expense.
I think when that goes to county council, I think it's going next week,
Yeah.
I think with a favorable opinion by transportation committee, it's gonna be no problem.
Yeah.
Right. I think Mr. Loftus asked the question, I think he accepted, well, why don't you just take the engine? I think he accepted, you don't want to add 4 years of useful life and then, are you going to just sit out there in the parking lot and not use it? I think with him saying, remaining silent, he accepted your answer.
Well, what Justin wanted me to do is to just put the engine on the asset inventory. So what do you do to appreciate that? And we've done this in the past and gotten into big trouble with our inventories. We've had triennial findings related to this problem. But I could, I guess, in theory, put that engine on the asset list for like 3 years and depreciate it over 3 years. But if something else happens to the bus and I want to get rid of it, I either got to trade out the engine or there's
How are you going to dispose of the vehicle without it? Yes, but I think the group between Mr. Loftus and Johnny, I think they understood what you were saying, I think.
And this, I mean, I learned a long time ago, we don't look a gift horse in the mouth, but, that what I have to give the county council credit for is listening. They've been really good listeners as it relates to our service, because they heard me when I first got here saying buses, buses, buses. All right, and so by virtue of giving us $1 million for buses only, really generous, shows, amazing support, but it's really kind of put us in a bind. I'm gonna have a hard time spending the rest of that $1 million. And, the engines are just sort of a part of it, just to kind of, burn that money down and get some benefit out of it. I mean, there's so many other capital expenditures that we could put that money towards.
Well, you did a good job with the county
I
council.
thought so too.
Yeah.
I thought so too. Brian, I think if it's on the agenda, which you'll know that by Friday, I think it'd be a good time to go there and just get there 15 minutes early and talk to the members of the Transportation Committee.
I'll do that. I'll be there.
And I think you'll have it assured.
Okay, moving
Why
on
did
to
it take so long to replace that engine?
Why did it take so long to replace? The engine's been replaced.
Okay,
It's just it's taken so long to get reimbursed for it.
okay,
That's
that's
the problem.
that's no problem.
I
And it's
thought Joe was-
contributing to our cash flow issues.
I thought Joe was mentioning the dark engine, and she said when the engine arrives.
Oh, well, this particular bus that we're doing right now, we sent the engine out to somebody else to do it.
No, that's what I kind of figured you would do
But we,
something like that.
we bought that 11th engine,
Right.
and it's been recycled
Few times.
10 times easily
Wow.
in a year and a half. So we're using it for sure.
Okay, how about ACAS?
Well, a couple things I wanted to say on KPIs.
What page?
If you go to page 9, at the top of the page, we had this huge increase in ridership in October, from 29,000 last year to 37,000 this year. And when I first saw that number, I was like, that can't be right, because this system is way too consistent. But then I remember we missed 5 operating days that last October. So that's really more on the order of a 1.5% increase over the last year.
Yeah.
That was Hurricane Matthew.
That was Hurricane Matthew last October. If you go to page 11, I just want to say that our paratransit group is kicking butt.
Yeah.
1,269 riders compared to 600 last October. A new record, you can see across the top of that page that's the most we've ever transported in October. And if you look at the first line of the effectiveness metrics down here at the bottom, passengers per hour, we hit the 1 passenger per hour mark.
You've been trying to get there for a long
Which has
time.
been a goal. Another reason why I wanted Doug in the room. Good job, man. And I'll even double up on that. I looked at the November numbers. 1,254 rides in 1,113 hours, a 1.13. Pretty good news.
You know what's nice about this though too is, if you look from October 16 to October 17, it's the result of a natural trend. The word is getting out. I mean, it isn't just like one thing got done and all of a sudden the dam got broken and everybody came and could. This is a matter of word to word, people to people saying that this works for them. And each month is better than the previous month. And I think that's a positive way to grow. And it's a positive way to get the message out to people. And it's a positive message back to our drivers as well. They weren't doing anything wrong. We just put increased emphasis. We've got some new machines out there. We're not, I hope the tape recorder's not on here, we're not fussing at each other about why we even have to do this demand response. We accept it, that this is part of our responsibilities. And we're doing it better. And most importantly, the people riding are feeling like we're doing it better because it's going up. So.
They are finding usefulness in the service.
Yeah. So, all due credit and kudos to the folks that are involved in this. And the scheduling of it too. I know that you've made an effort to schedule it in a more efficient way.
Yeah, we made some changes and they're obviously starting to take foot
Yeah.
now, so it's good.
Yep.
One thing I will comment on is that throughout my business hours, I'm out there working and so forth, I see paratransit buses. I was like, this thing really moving a lot. I was saying to myself, but I've never seen like that so dramatic like that, and I just was kind of impressed to see the numbers. I do see them a lot. I mean, I'm able when I see them moving I see them, but not that frequent at one time. But now I see them more frequent, so I know that they're pretty busy. And what is some of the reasons why it's busy, Doug? Is because that more people calling in now, or just are you reaching out to that particular segment of?
Yeah, and what we did a few months ago, Ryan got me involved with doing the day-to-day scheduling to try to improve the numbers, and we reached out to a lot of different churches and stuff too.
Okay.
So it gets to plays at church, and then one is when we do the announcements.
Wow.
We got the flyers up about the programs.
And it's new vehicles, they're riding on a nice
Now
vehicle.
every time I see improvement in ridership, and it's particularly in the area of private transit, because people do need those special services.
Right.
I get very elated about that because there's a lot of handicapped folks and people that need to have ways to get around that that's inaccessible without having someone to get there. So that's a big improvement, man. I think we need to be very, very appreciative of that. And another thing, on another note, is from a political perspective rather, whenever you approach the council, be very wise. I can tell you that from experience. Very wise in how because you deal with different minds there. Everybody don't think the same way. You got to know how you approach people. I'm gonna give a little bit of wisdom here because when you go up, everybody don't believe in transit, but you got to go there with a plan that's really going to be kind of general. So anyway, don't believe me, you try to see what happens.
Comment, probably warrant, at a future meeting, I'm gonna ask, I still have not been convinced the cutaway is the only type of vehicle we should be using for paratransit, and I'll be at a future meeting, be asking more statistics on ridership per vehicle. And you have 14 seats, 12 seats, how many people? I'm putting market, I'll be asking later for data on, should
I'll
we
be
not
ready.
be getting smaller vehicles?
I'll be ready.
Okay, all right,
So what's
Because the answer to that question is yes and yes.
okay.
Are you starting a business?
No,
It's more, it's less
I
about.
went through this in previous,
I know,
I had
I'm
14 vehicles, and we went away from all of the cutaway sizes down, we added 2 van types with a wheelchair lift, and they actually end up, miles per gallon were cheaper. The typical run.
I should hire him?
Yeah.
Should I hire you?
No, I'm just saying, we talked about this a little bit before, but,
Two responses. One, we are looking into smaller vehicles.
oh, good,
And two, it's more about the wheelchair positions than the seated passengers.
okay,
So those cutaways have 3 positions,
I understand.
and that's what you're basing your
Well,
capacity.
it is, but how many times have you met the capacity? I'm just putting
How
market.
many times have we put 2 wheelchairs on at one time?
Oh, very often now.
Well, okay.
So, and you need room to move them around.
I understand, I've been there, I understand, I'm just saying, put the
He's just
marker
gonna
down.
do a
that's-
morning.
So I'm just gonna jump over the table here.
Yeah,
Yeah, I do have a question though. A couple of times on 501 in the last 2 weeks, I've seen a bus and it is going to Lake City. And it's not one of our buses. It's a PD bus. Where on earth does that originate?
They're
Lake City?
bringing-
No, it originates in Florence.
They're bringing people to work
Goes
Bring
through
people to
Lake
work.
City, Johnsonville.
at the hotels.
Okay,
And
so
then there's another one that comes down 22.
They've been doing that for years.
I hadn't paid any attention to them. A bus was a bus. I assume they all were the same.
No, that's their glorified fan pool like Williamsburg does.
Okay, all right.
There's also a Santee Waterbury bus that I,
Yeah, not anymore though. Have you seen one recently?
I don't know.
They cut the route.
Well, these buses I've seen look like, the Grateful Dead slept in them.
That's right.
They're pretty bad.
And they
They
charge
bought
enough
buses
for
from
them
a school
too.
bus manufacturer.
$5 each way.
Yeah, how much?
$5 each way.
$5 each way.
Okay,
So
all right.
what's our coverage area for paratransit?
It's tied to the fixed route.
Okay.
So it's, the law is 3/4 mile. But we've stretched that a little bit in certain instances, depending on where our buses are, or like, one of the main scheduling changes is that we weren't using the fixed routes. We weren't letting the buses stray away from the fixed routes at all. So you couldn't access shortcuts, like using 544 instead of 501 for certain trips and things like that. So if we have if we have a request for a trip that is not necessarily within 3/4 of a mile, but we know our bus is gonna be going through there, we'll pick them up. So it's just a way to increase the critical mass of trips for that system, and it's becoming more efficient.
Well, as you plan the expansion of the authority, vis-a-vis a few years out, then there will be a challenge too, because that's going to greatly expand the demand response.
And thank you for saying that, because I did want to make that point, is that paratransit cost is going to be a critical factor when we start expanding, or a critical factor.
Then you might want vans.
And we might want some smaller vehicles, yes.
Okay, ATAX.
Thank you.
See, well, we also had cash flow
Oh, you're right.
and ATAX. So
I don't mean to be
I want to
rushing.
reserve ATAX discussion to the general manager's report.
Okay, I
So
just
let's
saw
talk
it
about
here.
cash flow, and I need the projector.
Okay.
Light off, Brian?
I can do my finger operations.
I have a text from Justin.
Text says, you're good. We hope.
Really? Is that okay with everybody? No, you still got a light on.
Do you snore like that? Oh, I'd kill you.
She chased me to the bedroom though.
Okay, so a big part of the discussion at finance was, we continue to have issues with cash flow, and I kind of skipped over the cash requirements in the finance report. But the bottom line is that at the end of 16, we had 100,000, I think, on the books in short-term debt at CMB. And then at the end of 17, we had 250. And so, you know, I think we were constantly kind of knowing that this was an issue, and we sort of related it to the overlap of our grants. And, you know, there were times when, you know, we were sitting on expenses that we couldn't get reimbursed because we didn't have an open grant, or those types of things. And I think it's gotten a little bit more serious than that. And we're at a point in the cash flow where we do need to borrow more money. So I'm going to ask you all for additional cap room. Right now it's at 250. I'm going to ask for, I guess I'll ask for 500, right? And I'm not comfortable in asking for that until I'm sort of comfortable that we have a way out. And I think the first way to kind of figure out how we got to this point is to or the first way of defining how we're going to get out of this issue is to kind of understand why we got into it. And I think it really is a series of like 1,000 cuts. And I think there's a lot of different factors that have gone into having this issue where we're sort of not able to pay these loans down. One is and the key to getting out will be how we're budgeting the use of our local funds. Because the federal money only comes based on expenses. We can't really increase the amount of federal dollars that we're getting on our expenses because that's all set in stone by, you know, either 80-20 or 50-50 type of reimbursement. But I think the biggest issue was, aside from not accounting for that 100,000 at the end of 16 in the budget for 17, because it was a balance sheet item, not an expense item. Not accounting for that is 100,000 of our issue. The transition from getting full admin cost recovery to an indirect cost rate cost us some dollars, and that's really where the budgeting of local funds comes in. In FY16, it was a 15-month year, we spent 12 months actually basically putting all of our admin costs into the formula for federal fund recovery, or, you know, being reimbursement. Now, we didn't get reimbursed for all of those costs, but we got reimbursed at a much higher rate. And then in July 1, because when we started the next state grant, we went to this 32% overhead rate that is based on, it was basically a provisional rate. It hadn't been approved by FTA. And that was right before we went into the FMO where they were going to help us with that rate. So what happened in 16 is that we recovered $150,000 more than we would have recovered if we were using an indirect cost rate. And that $158,000 had to go into generating the new rate for FY17. That's the whole true-up process we talked about, going from year to year. So that this is really hard to explain, so if you guys have questions, let them rip. Essentially, we had in the neighborhood of about $900,000 to $1 million in admin costs in FY17 that were budgeted. But we artificially, you ratchet that down for what's allowable, all right? So really, there was a smaller percentage of those dollars, let's say 800,000, that were allowable, all right? And remember, when we got into the development of the indirect cost rate, we had to take a lot of my salary out. A lot of my salary became unbillable. So that delta between total admin costs and the amount of admin costs that we could submit to FTA for funding, or the state for funding, went down. And then it was further reduced by this $150,000 true-up from 16. All right, so that, what turned out to be a 27.27% rate was going to draw down much less than what we were anticipating it was going to draw down, to the tune of about $150,000. The number's right on the button. All right, so this is the biggest hit, So in FY, all right, so and the other hit was the transit center, the Myrtle Beach Transit Center, we always anticipated that we would go after some federal dollars to pay for that. And we didn't because we ran into some issues where when you're doing a capital expense with FTA, you've got to be really conscientious of the period of performance. And we got it built and we paid Myrtle Beach, and we still didn't have an open grant for it. So I was basically going to open a grant in arrears, and we just didn't want to mess with it. Got to a point where let's just keep it local, and then there's other reasons for keeping it local. Would be that we'll have full control over it. We don't have to worry about FTA disposal, or if we want to move it, or any of the, we want to sell it to somebody, whatever we want to do with it later, we'll have a lot more control in it. But that was about a $90,000 hit that this is just really chewing up local funds. Both of these instances are chewing up local funds. And so I think that's reasonably, you can see that.
I have
So,
a question, Brian.
yes, sir.
When you talk about 32% as the reimbursement rate, it's 32% of what?
Yes.
Okay. In my consultant days, when I billed a client, I made, I don't know, $70, $75 an hour. And the company would basically inflate that by like 130, 118%. And that's to cover all the overhead, all my office, rent, all that overhead. That's exactly what an indirect cost rate is we're billing the operation and the maintenance department for admin costs. And so this is a methodology where we're taking for every dollar we spend in labor and operations, we multiply it times 32% to get an amount for.
And that's the admin overhead.
That's the overhead rate.
Okay.
So a good way of putting it is the overhead rate. And so that overhead rate sometimes shoots high, sometimes it shoots a little low over the course of a year. And that's what you do to true up, is if whatever that delta is, you roll that delta into next year. And so we have FY17, which was way low. That's allowed us to increase our overhead rate for 18. And so I'm going to have more horsepower in 18 to pull down admin costs.
Right.
Plus, we changed the CEO split.
But you don't want too much extra horsepower because
Well,
you give it back in 19.
And I was worried about it, because you're right, oscillating, the variability from year to year could present some issues. And I had a long conversation with Mike Leverton about it, because he's the one who's been helping us with the development of these percentage rates. And he said something that kind of stuck with me, is that, and I mentioned that question, I don't want this to oscillate, I don't want to create a problem in 19 by taking too much in 18. He says, well, no, in 18 you are getting what you're entitled to. In 17 you were getting what you were entitled to less $150,000. So he doesn't think that oscillation thing will be a problem. And I hope he's right. I think he's right.
Mike's the guy from Dallas?
Yeah, we've been re-engaging him on a number of fronts. But so this is what happened in 17. And we had $1,029,000 in costs. Some number less than that was eligible to be spent. But we generated $500,000 in federal, $16,000 in state, and we had to fund, that means we had to fund $510,000 out of local funds out of that number. All right? That is doing the match for what was billable and then paying for whatever was unbillable, which was a big number. All right? We had budgeted $372,000. So that's why we're cash poor right there. It's a big hit. So in the budget that you've approved for FY18, we have $1,096,000. We're budgeted for $554,000, and it basically had very similar stats. We knew we were going to get a little bump in overhead rate, and we should only use $479. So this number is coming down. All right. Well, we've gone through the process of truing up the overhead rate for FY18. And we're making a urban-rural split change, okay? So these are the new numbers for FY18. We're going to a 67-33 split, urban-rural. We talk about what that does. And then our new true-up number, which has more of my salary in the rate, will generate these numbers. So we're pulling in additional cash, and we'll now be almost $108,000 less than what we thought we would be using for local funds to cover admin costs. And that's because, two reasons. One, we're pushing, by virtue of this, we're pushing costs to the urban side, where we have more money available to us, away from the rural side. And we have more costs in this number that are actually billable, because my rate has gone up from 20% to 60%. So this doesn't necessarily require a budget change, a budget revision, because this is just how we're being reimbursed. You can see that the total cost hasn't changed.
So if we make that change, and so we won't be $100,000 in the hole again, but that doesn't explain how we'll get out of the hole we're in.
Well, no, what I'm suggesting is that we're gonna have $100,000 in local funds that we didn't think we had. And I wanna use those to start defraying the amount that we're over.
So then you're gonna be using that
So
to pay off the debt?
You take that 100,000, you divide it by 12, you know, that's, what is that, 8,000 bucks. It might not be that much that we can put towards it, but I'm thinking 5,000 a month between now and July, that we can knock down that debt.
That pays the CD down or whatever it is.
Well, it pays the loan, the short-term loan down. And so that means we'll have in the neighborhood of, if we borrow 400,000, which is what we're talking about doing, we'll have 350 in debt left over.
You did say you
on
wanted to
July
borrow
1st.
5.
I wanted to limit for
Is that
5,
just to push it?
but I think we're gonna stick with 4.
So you just want us to set a limit,
Yeah.
and you can work within that?
And so then beyond that, you know, so I'm comfortable with this because of this. That means I've got 108,000 local funds to deal with that we get regardless of what we run and we put out on the service. Okay, and,
That's a resolution?
yeah, we'll have a resolution. There's also more to this story that we will discuss in executive session.
Last page in your,
Okay.
after the long pages.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask, like Rob or Daryl, who, is a $400,000 debt, is that a good amount for a company with a budget of like $6 million? Is that a danger zone, or is that reasonable?
Well, think of it as what your reserve would be, because I think where Brian wants to get to is to have an established reserve. That's what we had heard. And an established reserve of 3 to 5% is on the lower side, but so if you're running a company at $4 million and you've got an established reserve of 5%, that's 200,000.
Yeah, I actually equate it to much bigger. I would go a month and a half. I mean, the transit industry go by is a month and a half of expenses. So that's 750,000.
Okay,
So that's where we're headed.
so we're within that reserve level at 400,000. You know, you've only eaten through half of the reserve of 750,000.
I don't get that. You're talking about the reserve fund. I think you're talking about the reserve fund of CDs that we're buying. I'm talking about the debt.
And, well, essentially the debt is serving as our O&M reserve, is the point that Rob was trying to make, I think. And so, you
In
know.
an ideal world, you have no debt,
and
because
you
you're
have money
using
in the
this
bank,
reserve.
And you can borrow against it. So when we get the $750,000 O&M reserve, then there will be, you all will set some policy on how far I can go into that on any given time. So it's very similar to the level in terms of borrowing.
All right, so the bottom line is that if you borrow this money, we're gonna be able to pay it back monthly. We're not gonna have a problem paying it back.
Right.
That's the bottom line.
But the other bottom line is unless we have some infusion of fixed cash, which we're hoping we'll get,
Right.
you'll never be able to build up the reserve,
Right.
which will prevent you
Right.
from having to then go into the debt. So this is why you have to go the fight
And
the
I made that point, you know, abundantly clear, is that the first step, once this new funding kicks in, when it kicks in, you know, I'm hopeful. We're not
Let me-
counting our eggs before we hatch.
Let me ask you a question, because, and I want to ask a guru, because I know he's a finance person. Now, and I'm not trying to down you or anything, tell me what he's talking about.
Let's do
No,
that.
seriously.
Let's do that.
So wait a minute, I think, let me rephrase that question.
Okay.
Are you buying this?
Am I buying this? I'm buying it, I guess, it comes out of the bank instrument, it's being packaged as a short-term note, but it's functioning as a line of credit.
Right.
That's my stumbling block.
So we do have some contractual issues with the bank
Yes.
that we want to discuss.
That's the only, if I were gonna give you a short and sweet answer, that would be my concern, is the bank, I mean, and I'm feeling what you're all feeling is like, am I gonna have to write a check for $400,000 in July and the money's not gonna be
But that's the
there?
purpose of having experts in the room. I'm not an expert. I don't think nobody here can financially deal with this guy here, because that's his job.
So I'm not sure what you're saying.
A lot of us aren't
Treating it
experts,
as a
all I wanna
long-term
know is
loan
if we
or-
can
Because
pay
right
it
now-
off.
Now, I'll make sure that we understand
Let's
what we.
just listen to what he
Well,
has
if
to
I
say.
can finish, please, I was talking, I was asking a question. I asked a question, because my question was, if we're going to hear what Brian is saying, and I could somewhat understand, but I would want to get a good, clear picture from a financial standpoint, and that's why I asked him to say something. That's why I asked him. So I was the one that posed the question, and I was had the right to be able to ask him to tell the board what he was saying. That's all I was doing.
Yeah. There's, again, and I think that it's doable. One of the things that becomes clear, we need to obviously submit, and this is a tangent, we need to submit our 5307 application to get that preventative maintenance money flowing, which will take us, coupled with that bank loan, will immediately take us out of this cash crisis once I'm able to draw those PM funds. So that's a critical component of this too. Brian is working on that, but that needs to be submitted, and that will help get us to what Mickey's talking about, where we can pay down the 5 to 10 grand per month. The question I have, or the only question I have, and I think Brian's covered it behind the scenes, and I'll be there, is the bank going to accept partial payments? Because to answer your question, what's happening now is we have two notes, one's for 150 and one's for 100, and they're kind of laddered like the old time CDs. So one becomes due, we cobble together off a draw $100,000, pay that note off and re-borrow it within a few days to kick the can down the road.
Right.
Then a few months later, the next one becomes due, we do the same thing. So we're rolling these things forward, but we're not progressing and paying down the debt. So what we need to do, or what we're proposing to do, is taking 400, wiping out the 2, and then paying down the 400 in smaller chunks instead of having a hard payoff date of the 400,000. That's the question I have. If there's no hard payoff date, then the thing functions like a line of credit where you're paying whatever you can afford to pay to knock it down on a sporadic basis, as opposed to paying the entire amount of the note off at one time.
So the problem is, we're paying off, if we didn't have to pay off these shelters, we wouldn't have this problem.
That's
Not
a piece of
I mean,
it.
that's one of the 1,000 cuts.
That is a piece
You know,
of it.
way back when we had the issue where we double counted a quarter of
That's another piece of it.
funding is a cut.
So
It's
it's
a lot of different things. All I'm illustrating here is the ability to
Right,
start
right,
paying
right,
it back off.
Yeah.
And that was really what I needed before I'm even asking you guys this question.
So borrowing this $400,000 and then paying the other loan, and then the ability to pay the $400,000 in pieces is one of the things we're after.
Well, but they're not separate. You borrow the 400,000 and there is money in there to pay the other loan.
Right,
It's
right.
not
See,
that
that one.
Yeah, we go to one note, we get another 150,000 in cash to get us through until this grant opens up,
And we have the ability to pay in pieces.
and we have the ability to pay in pieces.
But all along, he's been saying this is not sustainable past 2018.
Right.
Unless there is a fixed solution here somewhere. The payoff of
Shelters.
the shelters will help, because
Yeah.
that's a little bit of a drain every
Yes.
year, but that's not a big enough drain yet.
Right.
So
It's
this is a
And
different.
so the other factor is what county council did at their budget workshop, is that they're talking about increasing our funding.
Right.
Yeah.
And so to me, that gives me another comfort level that it's okay to do this, keep us going, because it's a pretty complicated solution. You think about, well, could we cut budget? Could we cut expense?
Yeah, then you
And
cut
that
revenue.
reduces our reimbursement.
Right.
So it doesn't really help us the way you would think it would help us unless we're cutting unallowable costs. And those unallowable costs are my salary for one portion of it, we can't cut that.
Oh, we could work on it.
But there's not a whole lot there to cut, is the point.
So how much interest are we paying on the 2 notes, and how much interest will we pay on the 400?
They're all right at 5%.
The catch 22 is, excuse me, the catch 22 is, and I'm getting clear on this, catch 22 would be that we're banking on the grants to make sure that we recover this thing.
Well, no, we're not banking on them per se, but, well, I mean, beyond July 1st, we could still continue paying that down at this slower rate. I think what the additional funding the county is contemplating would do for us is help us speed that up and actually move towards our own reserve.
But the grant money is essential in the aspect of this whole thing, though. As far as
Well, it's important to know that that's out there, yes. I think that is a factor in us, staff, even determining whether or not we're gonna ask you all for this additional,
Does everybody at this table,
raising the threshold.
does everybody at the table understand the potential for the 2 million from the county versus the old funding
Yeah.
We haven't
formula?
discussed.
I don't know if all of us understand that.
Why don't you go right into general manager's report, and we'll
Okay.
come
That
back.
answers part of Nikki's question, I think. It's more than grants.
Well, I think Nikki was going back to the 5307.
Yeah, I understand what you're going back to, yes.
Right.
Yeah, well, I mean, okay, well, we can, oh, that's too small.
Well, while you're getting ready, let me ask Ron something. The instrument that we're getting for $400,000 is a different bank instrument than the other ones, and that will allow us to pay it differently? Is that right?
That's, the way I understand it, what Brian told me, I wasn't in on that discussion, but I would say it's contractually different in that we can pay, we don't have to pay it all at once.
Okay.
We can pay it in installments, and they can be sporadic installments.
Oh,
if-
God.
It's formal transition is our general manager's report.
Well, let's,
Or-
I would rather just go into executive session so we can kind of clear some of this stuff up,
Where
because that's a
do we
contractual matter.
do that?
How long are we gonna be? We've got a guest here.
15 minutes.
You okay,
Sure.
Cody?
At least there's seating outside.
All right, could I have a request to go into executive session?
I so move.
Second,
All in favor?
Aye.
We are out of executive session. We had,
So you need to
no-
vote to come out.
all those in favor of coming out of executive session, please say aye.
Aye.
And during executive session, no votes were taken and no discussion occurred other than contractual. And we are back to business. Are you ready to go into manager's report, or are you
Yes.
still on finance?
No, this is a good segue into manager's report. So last week at the budget workshop at the county, we got some pretty good news about the assignment of road use fee dollars to Coast RTA. And what was really fun about the whole thing is that I didn't have to say a word. Chairman Lazarus got up to the podium and basically said, you know, here's what I'd like to do, and put it out there. They want to contribute $6.58 per car to Coast RTA, which effectively doubles the amount of money coming from Horry County to Coast RTA. He even had a plan for the $1,055,000 in discretionary funds to go towards county police and funding additional pay for officers who get advanced degrees and other training, which I think sold a lot of the counselors on it. And we got a 10-2 vote to incorporate it into the budget. All right, so it's not approved yet. It's going to be in the budget, so we'll probably have a really good understanding of where this all plays out in March when they go to do their retreat. But it certainly started the wheels turning for me, and it will continue to turn the wheels. But one of the other things that Lazarus said is that with this type of arrangement, now all of the cities, all of the jurisdictions are contributing to Coast RTA. And that is,
Then you have to give them transfer.
that's a pretty heavy thought process.
But does that mean that the money, that the little bit of money we are getting from those other municipalities is now going to go away?
Well, and that's what he was suggesting, and I'm like, whoa, time out, wait a minute. So I asked the county to send me their numbers on how much the cities are actually contributing, and that's what this chart tells you. So basically, Conway, 85,000, City of Myrtle Beach, 216. And one thing that I thought about was, That is exactly, almost exactly the amount we need for the entertainment shuttle.
It's also almost
So-
the exact amount.
So I have a date with John Peterson and Fox Simons to talk to them about that. City of North Myrtle Beach, 123,000, a bunch, you know, the smaller cities. And then the vast majority of it's coming from the county, the unincorporated
Which is
area.
Little River and so on.
Yeah, but more importantly, it's Carolina Forest and Sockasty,
Why?
which are, well, that's where transit might work. That's, there are densities there where we could probably really generate some serious ridership.
Really?
Yeah, I think, especially Sockasty. Carolina Forest is gonna be a hard
And
nut to
with
crack.
and with the hospital and the 2 medical centers in Little River?
Well, and I think, you know, in our vision plan, we've got those covered with routes, so we need to move forward. And the point that I definitely made with them is that this really, you know, if this does come to fruition, it really stabilizes the agency. This number, although it went down from 17 to 18, there's growth in that, about 1,800 cars, I estimated, but, you know, there's more and more people coming to the region, and we should see, you know, a 3% increase would be another 60,000 in the next year.
Brian, if we don't get that 216 from City of Myrtle Beach, I think I'm speaking for the board, the entertainment shuttle is dead. So there's no way we can continue.
Well, I think we're getting the 216 if the county votes the way we want it to. The issue is the 352.
They can't take away the 350.
I see what you mean. Oh, okay, all right.
That they give us in their general funds.
The second point, I have sleepless nights thinking of a bus going down Caroline Fork.
Well,
And
and
they
that
able to
is
get it on the new, you know, the new road they're putting through there.
international.
But,
that'll
international,
go
but
out
I
to
don't think
90.
you're gonna even get even a
Well,
cutaway.
and I made that point to Transportation Committee is that, you know, that's gonna be a tough nut to crack, because you're right, running
got
a bus
schools
down
in there now.
Carolina Forest, people aren't gonna migrate out to the
Wait,
roads to get.
Johnny said a very supportive statement that
Yeah,
the traffic and wouldn't go to work.
See,
So-
the
But that
recent
road comes out
statistics,
to 90, and 90 you have a lot of pickups. You have a lot of people
well,
walking
and log
along
trucks
there.
and all sorts of stuff, so.
Yeah.
Brian, I don't understand where what column that federal distribution came from.
Yeah, I'll get to it.
Okay.
I'll get to it in just a second. So this is the distribution. You can see the vast majority of it is coming from the unincorporated area. But I think if you looked at like North Myrtle Beach, we're gonna pick on North Myrtle Beach, Kitty. 123,000. If I were to distribute federal dollars, our 1.4 million a year, in federal dollars the same way, and this isn't completely accurate because like Aner and Loris are in the rural area, and these are just urban dollars. So I just wanted to kind of take this with a grain of salt, but I just kind of want to get a feeling here to see, to be able to illustrate a point.
this is the federal money we would earn off of the local band?
This is
we're getting
the
already.
money that we get on formula funds every year, distributed basically by cars, registered cars,
Right,
which would be a proxy
And
for
everyone has 2
population,
cars, right.
right? But if we were to assign 123,000 to North Myrtle Beach plus 86 in federal, which is based on their percentage, that means I have about $210,000 to spend in North Myrtle Beach. That is basically one bus.
One run. Yeah, that's right.
Well, that's good enough.
Well, it isn't, it isn't.
One about.
I think we ought to
bus-
start with
How many-
one,
how many
and
runs?
then, you know, and see what happens.
Well, let's run it all year round for that, you
No,
know,
how many times a day is it running?
hourly.
I agree.
Yeah.
But it's, you know, it's
I don't
maybe
think we
it's
should
an
start with 5
extension, maybe
buses.
it's an extension onto the 15 north going up, you know?
can always
I just
go
don't, it's,
Right.
the bottom line is it's not the level of service that I think the area warrants. And
No,
so we've got
it
to
is a
think
way to
about how we're
rationalize.
doing that as we move forward. And the only point I want to make is that we just
Oh,
need to
there's
think
Mrs.
before we grow.
Yeah.
All right, and we have to, we're gonna have to answer to this because people are saying, hey, I'm contributing to this, you need to provide me service, and I need to be able to illustrate to them, well, look, $4,000 doesn't really help me that much, you know? So, to be able to provide that service.
So in the,
But if you get that money from the
County.
county, the motor vehicle, rather, why wouldn't you ask them to give you money besides?
Well, I think that's where we're headed. I think that's exactly where we're headed. It's like, I'll be able to show a delta, like if, if we're gonna do this right, I need to do $400,000 worth of service.
Right.
So here's your delta, this is how much I need from you all to be able to start that service.
Right.
Or to go beyond one bus.
So, yeah, or whatever, I mean, I don't wanna predispose what that level of service would be until we get a chance to talk to them, you know, understand kind of what our abilities are. We got, the point I made to the transportation committee is, you know, right now, our labor pool is depleted as it is. It works for us right now, but if we're gonna put more service out on the street, we gotta have more drivers. And, you know, the fleet mix has to be right. So we've got a lot of questions to answer before we're really in a position to
And the
grow.
school bus company needs drivers too, they're really down low.
You know, it's
So
pretty system-wide.
this was the subject of my thinking in the middle of the night. If we're going from 1.3 or so to 2 million, it seems to me there needs to be a planning process. As you said yourself, you sort of stepped right in a way. There's no way we can grow dollar for dollar because we've got some structural work that has to be done. And I don't think that we as a board should leave it up just to you to do that planning.
This was in your dream?
Yeah, I know, it's a bad way. But I think we as a board, I don't know, 3 or 4 of us, need to begin meeting with you as March becomes more of a likelihood. I'm not saying we waste our time between now and then.
Sure.
But should this in fact come through, we need an organized rollout of rationalizing services, trying to figure out, you know, where demand response fits into this and fixed response, you know, what our long-term equipment needs are. None of us have yet addressed, for example, back to the entertainment shuttle, that those trolleys are, you know, nearing the end of their lifespan. And we've only been factoring in, you know, the cost and operating expense.
Right.
So it seems to me, doesn't have to be decided today, but I think as chair, or soon to be chair, or, you know, after I'm done, I think there needs to be a planning process of 3 or 4 people that is more than the regular board meeting, but that advises and hears the issues and gets them all out well ahead of time so that it's all very planful and orderly. That's just a suggestion.
That's a good idea, and the other thing on the same vein is that by March, when they have this budget retreat where they're going to be deciding this, you might want to have at least, you know, an outline.
Yeah.
Well, we should have a retreat. I think we should have a board-wide retreat when this thing becomes real clear, but an outline that is put together, you know, by a subgroup would make sense.
You have to take 2 budget retreats, because you're going to be asked that, I would guess.
Yes.
And I would answer your question earlier. That's why I was asking. You were around at the startup of all of this. You dealt with some of the reality issues of, you know, planning growth into areas where it's not there. I think that to the extent that you are comfortable, I think some of that history will come to bear and be very helpful to us in this process. And I think as incoming chair in a year and a half, Daryl needs to be a part of that process too, so you can get your little bands into the discussion. But I'm not comfortable just sort of leaving it to our current board discussion process.
Well, I mean, you might consider using service committee, service pack to kind of be your sounding board, but, and we just meet a little bit more often. You know, we do monthly instead of, you know, basically I've been running every other month. But
well, I'd leave it up to others to see. I think service pack has a completely different focus, which is on the day-to-day, how are things going. This is really, you know, I've grown to dislike strategic planning over the course of my career because it's so much make work when it's in the absence of some event that requires it. But this is an unusual instance where we'll pretty much know come March what a big part of our future is based on, and we should respond accordingly. If only to help you rationalize that last column over there. So all of a sudden, the town of Aner is gonna wanna see where they're getting their $7,753 worth of bus
We
service.
already heard that Saturday night.
Yeah.
Well, and, you know, there's, I think between now and March, what I plan on doing is looking at the whole issue of the funding equity that we have, because, you know, this isn't really accurate because not all of this is in the urbanized area. We also need to talk to Myrtle Beach and Georgetown County on how things might change with them. And so we're gonna start those conversations, but we have to also have to roll in the urban rural
Is
side of this.
Georgetown did not participate in the road use fee, is that right?
No, we're still on their discretionary budget.
Yep.
But, you know, I plan on meeting with Sal and I've already had a conversation about it with Billy Jean and, you know, it's not something that may happen this year, but, you know, we'll start that conversation for sure.
Well, and
It would be nice for them, if they were to go with a 658, what do we say? It was like 360, 360,000 instead of 235, something like that, so for Georgetown County.
Lily Jean, there's a new Georgetown City mayor, is he transit supportive, or any read on him? We get no money right now from the city,
That's
correct?
Hubert.
She's on the county.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
But
but she lives down
city.
there, they have a new mayor coming, I just
Yeah,
wonder.
well, that's where I was appointed from.
Right.
You get some money from Georgetown.
We,
Not
Georgetown
not from
County,
the city.
we get nothing from the city.
No,
Just
not
the
city.
county.
Any read on the new mayor?
But the bus goes through there and picks up.
Yeah, that's where I'm headed with this. Is the new guy, any
There's
feel?
not been any discussion between the two of us, but as a resident of the city, I don't see this as being among his top priorities.
Okay.
Well, he was on council already, wasn't he? On city
Yes.
council. So what would be the change, and is that okay?
Well, we've had some really healthy conversations with Georgetown County about an additional route to connect Andrews and their industrial complex in downtown Georgetown and then down to Maryville and or Georgetown Tech and some of those apartment complexes down there. So, you know, I told them, it's like, we can get a route out here, but it's another $140,000 to $180,000 and they, you know, the wheels were turning on where they might find that money. So I know that the desire is down there for additional service, at least at the county level. And we've met Mayor, what's his last name? New mayor in Georgetown City?
Barber, but we've also spoken with the administrator previously, and we will be revisiting them the 1st of 2018.
And I had a pretty good conversation with Sheldon Butts, who's a new counselor down there.
So
That's
we're
my friend.
awaiting their taking their new roles before we revisit.
So that's really kind of modus operandi now, you know, leading up to March, is just see where the other tea leaves are.
In January, I'll bring this up again to the board to see if you want to put an ad hoc group together that would, you know,
Do, I think it's needed,
participate in.
the frequency, January discussed it, we have the need for that, and it's probably weekly meetings
A couple of
almost.
times a week or once a week
Yeah.
would be something to just, you know.
Well, let me piggyback on what Darrell said, and Darrell asked me a question, it's a very general question. The mayor is on one vote, and he or she, with Myrtle Beach has a new mayor, has to be a consensus builder.
Right.
They can't get 4 votes out of the 7 people, they ain't gonna get nothing done. So if this
Right.
person already on council, 8 years or whatever the person been there, if he wasn't supportive of it, he's in leadership role now. So, and I understand what Darrell's coming from. You gotta be a consensus builder to get them 4 votes. I'm not talking, I don't know, I'm in the council in Georgetown, remember you got 7 people. I guess.
It is 7, and I'm not saying that he isn't.
No, I'm just saying, I'm just speaking in general. I'm just saying, if he wasn't, he has to be a consensus builder to be able to get enough support in order to get what we need. So, not saying you don't understand the
He's
process.
been there long enough
Right.
to deal with it, really,
Right.
and brings it to.
But,
Well, we have a new mayor with ATAX too, or with Myrtle Beach.
Right.
We
And Brenda.
have, in addition to the new mayor, there are 2 new city council, and we were waiting until they were seated in January before we visited them.
Right.
You got Jackie Marine and Greg Smith.
Do you want to get into ATAX or do you want to go somewhere else in your report?
I want to go somewhere else.
One question for you, you said the vote for the road use was 10 to 2?
10 to 2
And you know,
to include
You
Paul
agree?
Prince and Al Allen. And Al came up to me afterwards and said it wasn't about our funding, it was sort of about the Shelby.
half of that, I'm not
Yeah, well, he should
surprised.
have voted yes.
Brian, I think that between
Yeah,
now
we-
and March, we need to get together with Alan, we need to get together with Prince, and we need to anticipate the questions that they'll have and be ready to show them what we want to do with this additional money. Yeah.
They have never,
You don't
in
wanna
all
do
the
another
years I've been
apex.
on, they have never voted for us, those two.
Well, and I tell you what,
Yeah.
They haven't.
Alan, I know
Not
Al don't support because the people, this is factual. And if he heard it, that's fine, I can care less. But, he believes that the people in Ana doesn't, benefit. This is his philosophy, don't benefit from the services. And I talked to him personally, and I'm still angry with him because of what he said about the fact they don't benefit from the services. But I said, well, you know, we all pay taxes, this is already county, we all pay taxes. We all should be able to have services escorted throughout the county. That's my philosophy, whether the bus comes through
Is that
Ana or
what
not.
he thinks, or what his?
I'm telling you that's what he
his
said. They don't make
citizens
up
think?
story.
Because I know citizens that live there,
Well, I'm
and
gonna
they
tell you what
think
he
they should
said.
have it.
Now, if you stand here today, I'll say it in his face, and I'm just telling you what, I don't bite my tongue, I'm gonna tell you straight up, that's his philosophy on it. And if you tell him I said it, cause I go back to him and confront
He's my
him.
councilman.
He's been pretty supportive.
Yeah, and I think,
lately,
you know,
I
that
think.
we need to reach out to him.
But I'm just telling you what he told me about how he feel about his constituency,
Right.
and what he, in his district.
So, what time is it?
It's 25 after 11.
Yeah, so I would like to just go through this slide and table the employee survey if possible. If we can put that on the future. Because I need to do some more work on it anyway. So just a few notes. You have a new project list in your package, or it was handed out, or have you handed it out? You need to hand it out. It's coming around. But just to give you some highlights, FMO findings are completely closed except for one item, which is the International Navistar vehicle, these assets that we parked for safety reasons. I'm a little bit frustrated with FTA because we still have bad disposal equity resolutions from 7, 8 years ago. You know, like the Opus that burned and, you know, all those things that we still haven't made restitution with FTA. But they seem to be putting the hammer down on getting this resolved. And I guess it's because it's with an FMO, not a triennial. It's sort of a different thing. And the 2014 triennial where those issues arose was closed without them, you know, completely being resolved. So we have a few options, none of which are really good. We could put a bunch of money into them and put them back on the road and try to reduce their useful life that way. And get you know, depreciate the equity out of them, which is not really something that we're interested in doing because the engines on them just kept blowing. One of these vehicles has 80,000 miles on it and has 3 engines in it. It's just not really worth doing it. You know, I think one thing FTA is a little steamed about, and there's not really anything I think I could have done to control this, is that they've been parked for 2 years and we haven't really done anything. So I get that. You know, it's number 450 on the 500 things that we have to do, but they want us to try to get some sort of resolution with them. We have contacted the seller, which was National Bus Sales, which is bought by Creative Bus Sales. And we might have an out where we might trade these 2 buses for one of their buses, and then possibly purchase another bus, used buses. And then we can transfer the equity from the buses that are leaving the lot to the ones that are coming. And run those vehicles and work the equity off, the federal equity off that way. A couple things need to happen. One, we gotta find the money to buy one of them.
How much is it?
And we have to negotiate. They have 2 2016 cutaways, long cutaways that are basically the same model as our Starcraft, our shorter ones that we have. They are Altoona tested, and they have no federal money in them. They were used by a transit system as a lease. Triangle Transit was operating them up in the Raleigh-Durham area. And so we are gonna have this conversation with them, like, look, we feel like you're in breach of contract because these buses did not last us the 7 years that you prescribed. And so we need to work out some sort of deal with them, and you need to take these buses and you need to drive them off a cliff somewhere. Because don't sell them to somebody else, because they are not worth doing that to them. But,
And how much do you think would?
well, I mean, I think if we're talking about a $120,000 outlay, I would hope that we get at least half of that in the credit for these buses. So that's kind of where we're standing. I owe FTA email to that effect to say, look, can you give me 6 months to kind of work that out and see if they'll close the finding or not. We'll see how that goes. Because we don't have $207,000 in federal money that I can just put in the grant and then zero it out. And I wouldn't want to do that anyway. So the transfer route is the way to go. And we've identified vehicles that would be eligible to do the transfer. So that's kind of where we're headed with this. Triennial and DBE are still a work in progress. I mean, a triennial progress has been basically tied to the FMO progress because a lot of the findings were the same. So we have some of those are, some of the ADA ones we need to get moving on.
Is the outstanding ADA issues, is it beyond enunciation?
Oh yeah, that was not a finding. The ADA issues related to how we were advertising our service and how we were advertising how to get qualified for the service. But then the one that's really open that we haven't been able to make any movement on is the reporting side. In terms of, we claim that we don't have any capacity constraints, but we haven't been able to work out the math based on actual data to show that we don't have capacity constraints. So those are just, we just got to get them done. But how we're providing the service, the provision of the service is now compliant. So I'm in pretty good shape with that. I've added a line item for the FY19 budget because I think everything that's kind of relates to this new funding profile and working out sort of a funding equity plan and how we're going to roll forward makes some sense. As I'm calling them early action items as we're leading into the FY19 budget. I don't foresee a budget revision for 18 at this point. I don't think there's really any reason. We'll see what the November and the December numbers look like, but I think we're in pretty good shape with that. We already talked about stop enunciation. Got a few remaining buses that need the equipment, but otherwise it seems to be working and we're continuing to troubleshoot problems. We connected them all power, right? We're not running them on battery anymore.
That's correct.
Yeah, so they're now hooked into the bus's electrical system. And so then upcoming training, we have a conflict management program that is being in development. We have a local guy who's going to provide us with some conflict management. He's been running some focus groups with drivers and mechanics on, their day-to-day issues with, conflict and those types of things.
Is he in a company or is he a private consultant?
He's a private consultant. We met him through the chamber. He did some of the early admin sort of team building exercises and things like that. But I've also been in touch with Chief Hill over at the county police. They put out a APB, if you will, on providing live shooter training. And I texted him immediately saying, we need something that's tailored to buses. And he said, yep, we'll try to figure that out and get you something. He's got a little bit of a windfall with this change in the funding situation here, so he's a pretty happy guy right now. And so we will make that happen. And I think it's even possible that we might roll it into the conflict management. That is certainly the uber conflict when you're talking about a live shooter. But so we would do that for both facilities as well as the one on bus. Defensive driving is in pretty good shape. I think we maybe have 8 or 9 people who still need to take it. Is it that much? 8?
Right.
And those are mostly new drivers. And then I was invited to a GM summit in Atlanta in February. This is where 50 GMs from around the country get to come in and talk about issues. And then they have to listen to some spiels from vendors, but It's all expenses paid. It's at Stone Mountain in Atlanta.
World's
And
largest piece of single granite.
yes,
It's by invitation, so.
yes. So I have people in high places, I guess. So I'm looking forward to it, to talk about things like business continuity, employee development, labor force development. Maybe talk a little bit about these issues with cash flow and how the indirect cost rate is working for other people, and those types of things. So I think it's a really good opportunity, and it's not gonna cost us anything.
I'm glad you brought up business continuity, which is number 6 on our project list. It's in white. In the October minutes, Rob brought up what happened if our building went away. And the answer was, we need to plan for that. Are these realistic dates, or is that just?
The only reason why it's white is because it didn't change it.
Well, I know, but we say it's gonna start in January and be done in, is that real?
Well-
We got so much going on, is that gonna happen, or is it, we just keep kicking the can? I guess, and if we are, I understand why there's so much other stuff going
It depends
on.
on your definition of it happening. I think there's some elements of it, like what happens if our facility burns down tomorrow, that we need to kind of have
Yeah,
a clue about. So
Yeah.
those are the things I think we can start
okay,
on.
all right,
But
that's fair.
when we'll have an actual business continuity plan, I don't
No,
know.
in response to the October minutes, that's what he asked, and that's real, because that could happen tomorrow.
Well, and that's just some conversations, like talking to the university and the county
Okay.
and others about,
That's fine with
what's
me.
out there.
Fine with me.
And that brings up, I know Tom's in here, so what about something for your IT stuff?
Disaster recovery plan that's
Well,
in the works.
Yeah, we've been talking to HTC about that.
Are you maintaining data on site with no backup right now? I mean, do you have any off-site backup for?
Oh, no, we have offsite backup, and it's actually kept on the east and west coast.
Okay.
Okay.
Up in up in a cloud or somewhere? Or?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, good.
This transit center, I see you have water heater here. Is that for hot water? Why do you need hot water there?
Wash
You
your
don't need
hands.
hot water there unless if somebody's gonna take a bath.
Just for employees, just the employee.
My wife's
It's a-
hands with cold.
That's, you can cut that out.
Oh,
Oh, no. Well, you had no place to put it. Wasn't
Problem
that
is,
the
there's a
thing?
water heater in there that works,
Oh.
but it's taking up too much space.
That's what I mean. It was too.
So you just want me to take the thing out?
Sure.
Okay.
There are a lot of, you can go, gas station, you don't get hot water.
Well, I agree with you, it's not a priority.
People
at this
when you
point,
go
but
No,
we do have a
no.
code
I
violation.
get hot water at every gas station and the bathroom I've gone to.
Yeah, but you get cool weather
In the
winter.
summer, in the summertime, that water's hot anyway
Summer.
because the.
But what about during the winter
I
time?
swear, I wish I had
You
a
was gonna
crystal
take a
ball
bath
to
in
predict
there.
what you
I
guys are
don't
gonna
think
come up with.
the water would freeze. You didn't have hot water.
Hey, where's the payroll on this list?
Really?
Payroll?
Payroll machine or?
Doesn't get that cold.
Where's the payroll?
Payroll.
Well, we got two very minor outfits that actually put in a proposal.
Really?
One of them wanted 3% of the gross per cycle, which is about $3,000 per payroll cycle. I'm like, no way. The other entity was not capable. These smaller services, he's envisioning more of a timekeeping, comprehensive type thing. But ADP and Paychex did not even put
You
in
know
bids.
why? I'm wondering why they didn't submit.
We couldn't get an answer out of them. I was
ADP
actually,
wants to rewrite the federal requirements.
yeah, that was part of their.
And the other one didn't want to put their business on SAM, on the state, on the federal government website. It's just,
Okay.
we didn't get one from Strobus? Thought we got 3.
Well, you might want to add it to your list because I don't see it here,
Yes, you're right, it needs to be on the list.
just so that Bernie can help us remember.
One of them came in late.
Yeah, I
remember
think
which
so.
one it was.
But I was very surprised. I was hopeful ADP and Paychex had come in at $400 or $500 per cycle would be useful, but,
One of them had a problem with the 30-day billing,
yeah, they almost seem like
yeah.
excuses or something. I don't know, it was very strange.
So that concludes the general manager's report.
Let's go back to hot water.
Well, you had some things, there's been
I
no
think we've got-
movement on the gun signs.
The catastrophic, making a backup plan or somebody, all you have to do is say, I spoke to X and they'll take our buses if, if the place burns down.
Yep.
Yeah.
And follow up on that, letter to hotels, we've got a December 15th commitment
Yep.
on. Calendar for funding, basically, fourth quarter, we were looking for some kind of a schedule of when you're making the rounds with Georgetown and the various places that we are getting money. So we're looking for some, we just don't want a budget cycle to be missed, because we weren't in there
Understood.
when the municipality was putting their budget together. And I have a feeling it'll be, for the most part, they'll be put together by what, end of January or into March?
Yeah, it'll be early, won't it, Miss Lily Jean? Like January, they had to wait till some of the new elected officials got seated before they could make decisions.
I have
That's what we
made,
were waiting before we could start making the rounds.
right, I have made appointments with the staff side. I don't have set points, but I've asked for appointments with Adam Emmerich in Conway, with John and Fox over at Myrtle Beach, and with Sal. I believe all three of those will be done here by the middle of the month.
Okay.
And then the politician side, Michelle's kind of handling it, and we are kind of waiting for a few people to get seated before we go talk to them.
So then, letters to hotels, it just would disappoint us greatly if we miss that deadline, because we've got to be, even though we feel good about this discussion, we've got to have, there's got to be some fire under the,
Yeah.
you know, under the flame on this.
Yep. Okay, we can make that happen. And then I will bring you some enlightening information from our employee survey next time. I need a few more minutes to kind of digest what they're saying.
Did we do ATEX?
Well,
Tabled that.
Were we tabled?
well, no, I mean, ATEX
No,
is,
that was the employee.
ATEX is really this letter going to the hotels.
Okay.
And that's, the letter is basically asking their support with city council to provide ATEX funding for the entertainment shuttle, and then talking to them about how we handle fares on the service.
Has it not gone to the council already,
No,
the results?
it has
You
not.
have to wait until the new,
New ones are seated before it goes. So we got a little bit of time.
talked very nice to the new lady.
When does the mayor assume that role in Myrtle Beach? Is it January?
January 9th.
9th of January.
Is the ATAX, is the city ATAX decision likely to be made before the mayor assumes the position?
No, that'd be made in, around April.
Okay.
During the springtime, when they're gonna have everybody come up and get approved.
So you have a few months to talk it up.
Yep.
I think that was it on my short list. Anybody else remember things on their short list? And I'll add to the short list this discussion about some kind of planning group for short-term funding for January.
Who wants a calendar?
Board based.
I like that.
This is so cool.
Pass
We're one of these.
around.
Here, thank you.
You're free of charge or what?
Yeah, just don't like put them in a shelf somewhere, use them. If
We're
you're not gonna
August.
use them, we got other people who might wanna use them.
Take a look at August. Take a
Yeah,
look.
we're August.
Oh, really?
And look, they got the ocean
Five
out
of them
too.
now, ain't
We're
they?
the prettiest one. Oh, wow.
Where are we on the agenda right now?
And it's a 15-month calendar, so you can start using it now.
Approve resolution.
Take it over.
Oh, look at that. Oh, isn't that lovely? Right on the ocean, too. Did they take that
They took the
picture, or
sunny
is
day.
that just? put
Right
it-
there on the top.
No, we took it and sent it to them.
Where'd
Did
they
you
come
take
from?
it?
New flyer,
Oh, I don't know.
new flyer,
Huh?
new flyer,
New
And
black?
get one
the
from one.
company where we bought the
Look
buses
at all
from.
Oh,
Oh, yeah.
Looks like a city block. How could you ever run into that? I can't
okay.
imagine.
Agenda-wise, I think we are at approval of resolutions.
Yep.
And I apologize if I seem hasty, especially with Ms. Lily Jean. I don't know why I was trying to rush this through your agenda. I was trying to get that dream off my head.
And then with purpose.
And I apologize about that too. I thought we'd already had a board meeting
I did
since that time.
Waccamaw Regional Transportation Authority Resolution Number December 2017-19, authorization to enter into a new short-term agreements for cash flow purposes.
Have we changed the dollar amount to 400?
No,
We
but
should.
it says 500,000 a week. I would amend it in your motion, and
Yeah.
I think we'll just handwrite it on here.
So, all those in favor of an amendment to this motion of moving the 500 down to 400?
I'll make a motion.
Aye.
Any opposed? All
Second.
right. And now we can take up the full motion itself. Are there any motions to accept this, bring it forward?
I make a motion.
Second.
Motion and a second to allow the GM to float a line of credit for up to $400,000. Loans will be repaid within 90 days.
Really?
I was wondering about that. Is that true?
Well,
Not really.
we've been doing mostly 90-day notes and turning them, flipping them over.
But will a line of credit differ?
Well, this isn't a line of credit, we're still using the same instrument, but we are going to be doing a longer term.
So wouldn't you want to push that to 120 or 160 days or something?
180.
180 days.
180.
Yeah.
So could I have a motion to amend this?
Move 90 reads 180.
90 goes to 180. Any second on that?
Second.
Any discussion of,
Who made the motion?
I
He
did.
did, and she seconded.
all those in favor of 180-day repayment maximum?
Aye.
Opposed? Now we have the motion itself. All those in favor of the motion itself as amended, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, please say hell no.
Discussion?
Discussion?
Dr. Sheehan, would you initial where we made those
Yes,
changes?
I will.
Thank you.
The last four words in the background, the other various operating expenses, what are we excluding, just for my information? This sort of,
Capital,
well, no, okay.
Capital is.
Restricted to capital, payroll expenses, or various other operating expenses. That's a,
so the question is, what are we,
Yeah.
we're not doing the, well, we are doing it, we have done in the past for bus purchases.
yeah, we have. I'm just curious, what are we really limiting?
We're
We're
not,
saying we're restricting it, but we really were not.
it doesn't seem like it.
I mean, it's open, that's what I'm just curious on the phrasing of that. We don't have to change the resolution
Well,
per
I
se, but
think,
my
I think
understanding is
assuming if we were,
hiring new people,
well,
You
it's an
expand your
that's an
staff?
operating expense.
that's what I'm thinking. I'm saying, what are we really excluding?
Only thing I can think of that might not fall into that would be if we're borrowing money from somewhere else, paying off that,
Okay.
So debt would be one thing.
debt might be one thing.
Payment of,
Point of clarification, if I may, I cut you off, I'm sorry.
No, they're still just
I
trying
don't
to
know
answer
that
my
there's a limit
question.
there.
Yeah.
I just asked, so 180 days, that's an extension?
The next
99
note we're
days.
planning on doing with the bank is a 180 day.
Right, that's a little more than an extension.
Mhm.
any other questions?
No, I guess it gives you all the flexibility you need. Really, it's a lot of wasted words there, really, but,
It is.
okay, that's all right. I don't
Thank
want
you.
to change, I don't want to change the resolution, but.
And I would like to also interject that, I know Brian doing a lot of soul searching and work, and I'd like to commend the chair for making a recommendation that you have some people on board to try to come up with some ideas to try to generate some pressure off of this.
Well, let's finish this off. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Thank
Pass
you.
it. Motion
So how are
passes.
you gonna sign this now, because that is to have to be changed?
We've initialed it.
Yeah.
I've initialed.
Is
the-
everybody initial the change or just the chair?
Just the chair.
Good, okay.
That's just so that you know that we didn't change it after we got signatures and the back of the office or something.
Do we have any old business? We have a way of leading old business into manager's report and other topics, or maybe I have a way, and I apologize for that. Any new business?
I have a new business. I was sitting at the Transportation Committee. They started everything, the first topic on the agenda do we have a vote to approve the agenda? Is that a Robert's Rule requirement? We don't do that here. Another organization, man, we start out, do we have approval for the agenda?
I think that is in the newer version.
Because you remember, Monday, that's the first thing that Mr. Loftus did, is do we have a consensus on the
Well,
agenda?
we could also use that as an opportunity to amend the agenda, although we're a public meeting, can we amend it at the time of the meeting?
See,
Yes.
if we'd done that today, I would have asked that we move executive session to the end, so our visitor could have left. And
Yeah, and you
that,
can do that.
at the note I made last night, is that's the one thing I would have changed on the
Yeah,
agenda.
well, and it's that, we needed
It
it
happened to
before
go
we
right
did the
there.
resolution.
Well, I understand why today went that way, but on,
And we normally do, we moved it today. That's
because you knew that was gonna
normally-
happen, huh?
That's normally after approving resolutions.
So back to my first question is, should we in the future start out by saying, do we have an approval of the agenda?
It would be,
You can probably do that.
it would be between 7 and 8 after we approve the minutes. We would then have approval of the agenda.
Right.
We can do that.
That would be good.
And I'm planning on having in January the newest version of Robert's Rules and also a sort of a cheaters version
There's
We
a,
do
for
that
each
here.
of the board members.
there's a Robert Rules for Dummies. There is.
Yeah, there is.
I bought it for my
Yeah,
wife.
so we wouldn't
That's
cast any dispersion
Why?
until
Or
it's.
anyone named Robert.
It's edition 11,
They're right.
and I'm going to get a full edition, and then they have like a Cliff Notes version.
Okay.
Then I'll have one for each board
Wonderful.
member.
Have a motion
And
to,
I think we probably need to follow that because we're not doing it.
Mhm.
You know, and we're saying, I'll move, and that's not.
No, we're not supposed to say that. You're right, not all the same. I so move.
okay, I'll read it over the
But
record.
it's so much easier, isn't it?
And if
Just
we don't follow it, then we'll,
just an announcement that we have our Christmas gala on Saturday night at 6 p.m. at the convention center.
It was at Sheridan.
What is the dress code?
Tuxedo.
Well, people dressed up last year.
You have to wear a tie?
Yeah, women love an opportunity to dress
They were
up.
dressed,
So the jacket.
dressed in
Jacket.
Jacket but no tie.
Slacks and
I'm
sport
good.
coat is fine. You don't have to-
All right,
Ugly Christmas
I
sweater.
got my suit out already.
could I have a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion.
Second.
Second, all done. All in favor?